Hey everybody, this is the Tom Rowland Podcast brought to you by Starbright. Starbright's the maker of incredible products to help take care of your best investments. Some of my best investments are my boats, and some other people's are their RVs. They make an entire line of products that you can use not only in your boat and RV, but at your home as well. Check out Starbright and take care of the stuff that you really like. When I did an Ask Me Anything podcast recently, one of the questions was, what are a few of your favorite podcasts that you've ever done? And I don't know that I have favorites, but I do have ones that were more meaningful, more impactful, left me remembering those interviews longer. I found most of my early guests through you guys. I ask, who has suggestions for people to go and interview? And I knew I wanted this to be a little bit more than a fishing podcast. I wanted to interview interesting people, and I really wanted to interview interesting people that had done something unique that maybe no one else had been able to do, or very few people. And that led me to this one particular individual that goes by the name of Homemadewanderlust. Homemadewanderlust is her YouTube channel name. Her trail name, for those that are not familiar with the Appalachian Trail and the Pacific Crest Trail and the Continental Divide Trail, when you're on those trails, you kind of get a trail name, a nickname, something that the other people call you. Jessica is from Opelika, Alabama, right next to Auburn. She went to Auburn and got a degree in engineering, found herself on an oil field. She didn't really particularly like that. She decided that this is not the life that I want to lead. I want to do something different. So she gets in the car, heads back towards Auburn, Alabama. Along the way, she starts thinking about how can she figure out what it is that she does want to do, and a memory from her childhood comes up of her and her grandmother in a parking lot with a sign for the Appalachian Trail. She asked, what is that sign? What does that mean? Grandmother said, well, you could get on that trail right there and you could walk all the way to Maine. Somehow that memory stuck in her head, and she decided on that way back from the oil field in Oklahoma that she's going to walk the Appalachian Trail, having never been camping in her entire life. She does that, makes a nice YouTube channel, decides that she wants to then walk the Pacific Crest Trail and then walk the Continental Divide Trail, making her a triple crowner, which is a very big accomplishment in the world of hiking and through hiking these trails. Those are the three big ones in the United States. She did all three, and she had just done that when I did this interview with her. I found it incredibly interesting how someone could take their passion and figure out how to make a living at it. You're going to figure out how to be a professional backpacker? Like, that is pretty unlikely. A lot of people thought maybe it was pretty unlikely that I could figure out how to make a living as a fisherman. But guiding is an industry that lots of people do. Professional backpacking? That's a tough one. But she managed to figure out how to do it through YouTube, and she's been very successful at it. I found her to be a really, really interesting person, really interesting character. And when I put this first podcast out, I had gone to Opelika, Alabama, visited Jessica at her house, and we had this great conversation. With me was a camera, but at the time I didn't have an editor. I didn't have anyone to help me put this together. And so I only put this podcast out as audio. What you're about to see is never before seen footage of us sitting in her home in Opelika, Alabama, right after she had become a triple crowner. We sat down and had a great conversation. This is Jessica Dixie Mills, episode 887. Check out her story. It's coming up right now. Here we go. I am in Opelika, Alabama, sitting down with someone that I have tried to contact for a while. She's not easy to contact because you've been all over the place. You go by Dixie on the trail. I didn't know if that was what you went by regular, or if you had to be like in the brotherhood, the fraternity, the trail to call each other the trail names. Yeah, I didn't know, but that's your trail name.
Yes.
So, but Jessica Mills, Dixie. And one of the things that I wanted to talk to you about, you have just created this life for yourself, which is really awesome.
you have done the Appalachian Trail, you did the Pacific Crest Trail, and now you have completed the Continental Divide Trail. And that is known as the Triple Crown of backpacking, right?
Yes, sir. That's correct.
So how in the world did all this happen?
It was almost by accident. I mean, I hate to, obviously you don't just stumble around and then suddenly you've hiked, over 7,000, however many miles it is. But it was something that the Appalachian Trail was something that I had wanted to do since I was a little girl. I mean, it's the first thing that I remember, maybe other than like going to Disney World or something like that, that I really wanted to do. And it all happened. I was actually up at Newfound Gap
Mm-hmm.
in North Carolina, Tennessee, and I saw a sign that said Appalachian Trail or Appalachian Trail. That's a whole controversy in itself, but it's like either one. We know what each other means. But and I saw the sign and I was trying to read it, and I asked my mom what it was, and she was like, "Well, that's the Appalachian Trail, and that's where people walk from Georgia to Maine." And I said, "Well, I want to do that." And she said, "Okay, well, you can one day when you're grown, And I was like, "No, let's go right now." And she's like, "We can't do that right now." So I thought, well, one day I will do that, and I'm going to, and so it always stayed in the back of my mind. And then I did, kind of what you're supposed to do as far as society is concerned, which is go to high school and make good grades, and then go to college and get a good job. And I woke up one day playing house with 2 dogs in Denver, Colorado, working in the oil field, and I was like, why am I not happy? I've done the exact recipe that you're supposed to do to find success, supposedly, but I didn't feel happy or really successful. And so I started kind of going back to the roots of life and going, when I was like young and innocent and before, I was told I was supposed to do all these certain things in life, what did I want to do then? And, the first thing that came to my mind was, well, you've always wanted to hike the Appalachian Trail. Like, why haven't you done that yet? And so I thought, well, I'm 28 at the time. I had no kids, no commitment, like other than my dogs, and I knew my mom would watch them, So I was like, I'm just gonna quit my job, cash in on my retirement. I'm gonna go take a walk and think about things, and so that's really how it all happened.
and it's just that simple. You just woke up one morning and just said
enough of whatever this is.
What do you think led to that? Like, is it that you're just experiencing, like, I thought it was going to be better than this. Like, and this job that you had, you were telling me before the podcast that you went to Auburn and you are an engineer.
Yes.
Right? You have your engineering degree. So this is not just a job out in the oil field. You're an engineer.
I was an engineer, yeah. Yeah. I mean, student loans and the whole 9 yards, yeah, I did. I went to Auburn University for biosystems engineering, and I worked for the Department of Agriculture in Alabama for a while, and I actually really loved that job. And then I moved out to the oil field mainly because of the promise of exploring the Colorado mountains. It was like, because I didn't know anything about the oil field in Alabama. It's not, this isn't an oil patch town or whatever, here. And so, but a friend of mine got me the job out there, and he was like, yeah, you should move out here and work for this company and everything. And I was like, I don't know anything about the oil field. And he said, well, are you an engineer? And I said, well, yeah. And he said, you're going to figure it out then. I was like, okay, fine. But it just wasn't fulfilling. It really, I don't know what it was. I mean, it wasn't a bad job. It was a decent paying job. And but like I said, I felt every day like I was waking up and going to work and coming home and living for the weekends, and I'm like, is there not a better way to design my life to where I have more freedom to actually live, because we're only here. I feel like we kind of live backwards sometimes, like we are always preparing for this greater thing, and then some of us are lucky enough to get there to retirement, some of us don't, so.
Mm-hmm. But even retirement in itself, you see so many people that retire and then shortly after either they die or shortly after they are so bored that they go back to work or they create another job. It's like this retirement is put out there for you like it's this great thing, but then you get there and you're like, really? Like that's it? Yeah. I mean, and so you're just kind of looking at that thinking that's not going to be me?
No. I mean, I already kind of felt like you were saying, like this isn't what I expected life to be, and it wasn't bad, it wasn't a bad life or anything, but it just, I'm like, it could always be better, right? So you can
right. That's something I talk to my kids about a lot is don't settle. Yeah. Like lots of people settle for an okay life.
Yeah.
And there's probably nothing wrong with that, except that it could be so much better. And like
Right.
that's what I guess you saw. Now on the weekends, you're saying you're living for the weekends. Are you backpacking out there? And
I was hiking. So I had actually never been on an overnight backpacking trip until the Appalachian Trail. So I've been on 3 overnight backpacking trips, AT, the PCT, and the CDT.
that's
So
unbelievable.
that's like you were saying, you might not know what a saltwater fish was, but you were like, well, I'm going to do this thing anyway, and that's the kind of the same for me. I had been on day hikes and stuff like that. But I had never put everything in my pack and walked with it. And the first night I was cooking my dinner, I hadn't used my stove until that moment, and I was like, okay, how does this thing work? I can figure this out, and that's just kind of how it was. Like,
so when you decide that you're going to quit this job and this Appalachian Trail is your target, your destination, what kind of time period are we talking about before you started?
So I knew that I was going to quit that job somewhere around August-ish. And then on November, like the beginning of November, I actually quit. And then I was on trail by the end of March. So it was pretty fast.
Yeah.
It was less than a year of prep. Like I just woke up one day and I ran into a random guy. I went to this work function. A guy I worked with was like, "Can you please come and like help break the ice?" Because in the oil field there's some like whining and dining, and it's all about building relationships with people and whatever, and golfing and whatnot. And so I went to this thing, and I kind of ran into this guy who was randomly in town interviewing, and said that he had hiked the Appalachian Trail. And I went home that night, and that's when I looked in the mirror and was like, I'm about to do this. Like, it just reminded me of that thing that I had always wanted to do. So I'm like, if I hadn't run into that guy that exact day, it's like there are seeds planted over time, and then somebody throws a little fertilizer on, and then some water gets dumped on it, and then it happens.
Have you ever? Do you know that person?
I actually I reached out to him when I decided I was going to do the AT, but I haven't that much since then. I don't even think I have after I finished, but
Look what you
I
did.
should. I know, like, look what you caused in my life just by randomly mentioning that you had done the Appalachian Trail. But yeah, it's kind of crazy. I think that we cross paths with people like that, and so you never know what effect you can have on somebody by just sharing something that you've done, and it's crazy. It's like,
right. But you're kind of more aware of that at that moment because you're like, you've already thought about it,
Yeah.
maybe, or whatever.
Right.
I don't know.
Yeah.
But then, so you move back and then you're going to do this, but you haven't put a backpack on.
No, I didn't even own like
so you have
a real pack.
But you have a year there. Are you trying to get in shape? Are you trying
Well,
to?
I had from, let's see, when I got home, it was December 1st when I got home to Alabama. So I didn't buy any gear until February. I bought some boots.
Mm-hmm.
and then by the end of February, I think I had most of my gear. But so I put the pack on when I finally got it and put a little bit of weight in it and kind of walked down the road a couple of times just to see if it would feel okay, but that was it. Like I wasn't exercising. I wasn't really preparing physically. I read a lot. I did a lot, and I don't want anyone to think that I just like, went and picked up something from the thrift store and said, well, I hope this works, because I did research beforehand a lot, and into what gear had worked for other people who had done the same thing that I wanted to do, a million reviews. But the thing with backpacking gear and really any kind of gear for any sport, right? It's always a dynamic thing. Like, it's not, you get this and then you're done,
Right.
I mean, how much fishing gear have you bought over the time? You know what I mean? It's like, and then they come out with some new technology, and then you got
constantly evolving. And
it's lighter and better and faster,
yes,
and
of course.
whatever, so you always have to, so it is an evolving thing, but I did get some, decent solid gear to start with, and had made sure that it all had good reviews.
So I've always thought that doing this 2,100 mile, 2,500,
2,189.2 miles that year.
over 2,000 miles, And I've always thought that it would be a really cool thing to do. And I've done sections of the Appalachian Trail, and I've done sections of the Continental Divide Trail, and never done anything on the Pacific Crest Trail. But in my time in Yellowstone, you come across some of those places, and then you just kind of think about, wow, that'd be pretty cool to walk from Mexico to Canada.
Right.
But there's a lot of logistics involved in that. And so coming from a place where you had never put on a backpack and spent the night outside, how did you work out all the logistics for this? And then I guess you just had some money saved up, and so you just decide, this is it, I'm just going.
Yeah.
And then once you're out there, you don't have any bills, right?
No, I mean, I did still have like the utilities here or whatever, like some minimal stuff, but I wasn't paying rent in Colorado anymore, and I wasn't, but I also didn't have a job anymore, so, but what I did is, and it was a terrible idea, and financially, but I mean, it all worked out in the end, but I cashed in on like the little bit of retirement that I had built up, and, used that, and I mean, I was penalized, people are like, how'd you do that without getting a penalty? I'm like, no, I was penalized. At the time I didn't care. I was like, I just need to go and walk and think. But yeah, logistically, I think a lot of through hikes end on the couch while people are planning them, because they get analysis paralysis. You just like want to analyze everything and set up your whole schedule for 6 months. But if I ask you right now, what do you want to eat for dinner a week and 3 days from now? You don't have any clue, right? So this is the same thing is true on the trail. So you kind of figure that stuff out as you go. And in a well-traveled trail like the Appalachian Trail, people have capitalized on the ability to sell to hikers coming through, So a lot of folks think you have to sit down and plan all of your food boxes, for each town that you're going to stop in. But you can buy most of that stuff while you're out there, unless you've got like a very strict diet or something like that. But, through hiking is kind of like when you're 5, all the stuff you want to eat, like cookies and ice cream and just, have all that for real meals. It's kind of like that. If you want to do that, you can eat anything you want and still lose weight. It's incredible.
You're walking 2,000 miles.
Yeah. So it was pretty great. But yeah, I mean, I kind of freaked out a little bit logistically. But I knew as long as I had everything I needed to live, like I'm not going to die in this first 3 to 5 day stretch. When I get to the next town, I can figure it out from there, and like I said, people have capitalized on the opportunity. There are gear stores, there are outfitters and things like that. So you don't have to, stress over it too much. But.
So I would imagine a lot of through hikes also die on the couch when somebody's thinking, I really need somebody to do this with me. Like,
yep.
And then they try with their friend. Their friend's like, are you crazy?
I'm
like,
not doing that. Yeah.
Doing that. Like, that's...
Yep. Same. That was how it was with me. I mentioned it to a couple people and everyone's like, maybe I'll come hike a section with you or something. And nobody did.
Right.
Nobody
and so you just said, I'm just going along.
I'm doing this. I've always kind of been like that. And I don't know, it probably came from my mom. She's kind of like that, but it's like when I've made up in my mind that I want to do something, I really would love to have the company, but I'll do it by myself if I have to. And, so, I moved to Colorado by myself. I went hiking out there by myself a lot. And then, I decided I was going to do the AT by myself. And it's funny you say that, because when I told my mom, she was like, oh no, I knew eventually one day you were going to do this, but I was really hoping you'd be married or have a boyfriend to do it with or something. And she's like, I really don't want you to go alone, but I know you're going to do it. So, whatever. And I did, and it worked out.
So what is it like when you have zero experience, but obviously very driven, and you're in the parking lot, and now this thing's about to start? Like, I can't imagine. I would think that, between the three, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you did the whole Appalachian Trail, and then the Pacific Crest, and then the Continental Divide. I would imagine that the hardest had to be those first couple of days on the. I mean, I don't know.
No,
is it?
No, I was. So if you look to like my first video on the Appalachian Trail, I was so nervous. Like my first few moments, I was like, I'm about to hike the approach trail, and I was like, my voice is shaking, and I honestly was crying. I was like tearing up before I started, talking on my phone about it. And but honestly, I'd love to say that when I started the PCT that I wasn't nervous, but I was nauseous on the bus ride to San Diego, which is where it starts near there. But I was like, man, I feel like I'm going to throw up. Like, I'm so nervous, and the same thing, not as bad with the CDT, but still, still very nervous on the way out there. Like, did I forget something? Did I, and you'd think that after you do that so long that, that there are no nerves, but it's a big deal. You're committing to live out in the wilderness for a 6-month period. And once I start something, I'm not one, unless like it's death, you know what I mean? I'm not giving it up. So.
Right. That must be what's making you nervous, is like, you're not like starting this thing and going to see how you feel in a day or two.
No.
It's like,
I'm all in.
people only get nervous when they're like, well, there's 2,000 miles ahead of me. Like, not like, I'm going to see how I feel, maybe Virginia, I'll come home or something like that. But if you give yourself it's like burn the boats or whatever, where it's happening and you're there, and then you start, and I would imagine just like so many other things, that once you start, you're still going to have plenty of challenges and obstacles and good days and bad days. But once you start, you're doing it.
Absolutely. Yeah. After the first few steps, it's like, wow, what was I so worried about? Like, this is going to be okay. And like you said, there will be good days. There will be a lot of bad ones too, but you're there, it's just that anticipation building up to it. And I think also a lot of people before they start, will get nervous and will kind of talk themselves out of it in some way, like, oh, well, maybe it'd be better if I save up one more year, or, oh, maybe by next year I can get somebody to do it with me, or they'll just find some reason why maybe they should just wait till the next year. But, when you find yourself doing that, I don't know, it's just, you're always going to push those dreams to the back burner, and you're never going to actually make them happen,
So how long did it take you to complete the first trail, Appalachian
It was
Trail?
a little over 6 months.
And is that a normal amount of time?
Usually people do it like 5 to 6 months, but I had some hitches in the giddy up along the way on that trail. I got plantar fasciitis up in Pennsylvania. I had a siblings graduation I had to come home for, so that took off a week. And then I actually ended up having to come home again. I had a dog get sick. It was back home, being taken care of. And I got sick, and so I came home to see about her, and she actually passed away like 2 hours before I made it home. So it was awful. And so I had to deal with that, and then I had to go back out there, so I had about...
I would even imagine that was hard to get back out there. I mean, I'm very close to my dog. I
No,
have a
they're
dog
my
named
children.
Gus.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have a dog named Gus. He goes everywhere with me. If I walked into the kitchen, he'd go with me. And it's...
absolutely.
I lost one last year, Bravo. And you just get so attached to those dogs. But I would imagine that that's probably a good opportunity to maybe go, I'm going to start over. Or I'm going to do, that was good enough.
Yeah.
But you didn't.
No, I didn't. And, what I realized is, like, I can make this as an excuse to be like, oh, well, it kind of derailed things, and mentally I'm just not, I don't want to get back out there or whatever. But she's going to be gone whether I'm here or whether I'm there. And, the trail, and I think nature in general, whatever your thing is in nature, is a great place to deal with things like that, to think about them. And of course I dealt with a lot of guilt. Like, if I hadn't left, would I have figured out something was wrong with her sooner? And would I have, would she still be alive? And am I selfish for doing this? And, but being out in nature is a great place to beat yourself up and then get over it, so.
And so when you're on any of these trails, are you truly, I mean, I'm sure that it varies. I've never done a full through hike, and most of my hiking is, we're going to go over here, and you got your little group, and you go over there, and you camp, and you come back. But I would imagine that as you're going on these trails, you're meeting up with different people, and everybody has a trail name and all of that stuff. So you're meeting up with different people. Are you truly alone out there, or do you have some? I mean, eventually, do you kind of meet some people that you hike with or camp with, or what? How does that work?
So that's a good question, because it depends on the trail. So on the Appalachian Trail, there are so many people out there. Pacific Crest Trail, a little less, but still a very populated trail. The Continental Divide Trail, except for where it overlaps, like the Colorado Trail, is pretty lonely. So, I was afraid when I got on the AT that I was just going to be alone all the time. Part of me wanted that, alone time, but part of me was afraid that I would just never see anybody. But there were so many people, and I am really glad I ended up making a pretty close knit group of friends I think we probably all hiked together about 200 miles or so. There were 10 of us, and we had all started alone, and there was everything in this group, from an 18-year-old boy who had finished high school half a year early so he could go out there, all the way up to, I think the oldest was probably in his 40s or so, and we just all, it was an unlikely group that was together, because we might have had something in common, but anyway, I didn't have any backpacking experience, and they had, some of them, a lot more than I did. And so, I don't know, we all kind of could lean on each other and help each other out. And then we all got separated when I had to go home for graduation. So I kind of got two different hikes. I got being with a group all the time, and then I got kind of being around some people. But when I finished in Maine, because I was so late to finish, there was not really anybody around. Maine was a very lonely, cold, and miserable state for me. But it was beautiful. It was still gorgeous.
So when you're finishing alone, God, that's got to be just emotionally, it's got to be like kind of overwhelming, I would imagine, that like this thing that you built up and this thing that you've worked so hard for, now it's over. And what does that feel like?
Like when you
finish
like,
the trail.
Okay, I touched the sign, I'm done. Yeah. Now what? Yeah. So you do have time to think about some of that while you're out there, like what next, and I didn't find myself thinking about that until probably the last month. I was like, oh no, I said I was going to think about what I'm going to do. And now I'm almost 6 months in, and I haven't really thought about this. And, standing on the top of Mount Katahdin, if somebody said to me, are you going to hike another trail? I would have said, no. Absolutely not. In that moment, I would have been like, I am done. But 2 months later, I was already itching to get back on trail. And I gave myself some time. When I got home, I was like, do I go ahead and now try to find an engineering job right away? Or, so what I did is I just got a couple of part-time jobs, and I actually started growing and selling microgreens. I don't know if you're familiar with those, but it's like kind of, they're not sprouts, but and anybody that knows what microgreens are will probably cringe when I say that, but like, but they're grown in soil anyway. So I just started kind of dilly-dallying with different things and working some part-time jobs, and trying to give myself some time to decompress and think about it, And I knew after a couple months, I was like, I have to do this again. Like, how can I make this something that I do again?
Right. And so the way that I found you was through YouTube, and you've got this awesome YouTube channel, and you've documented your Appalachian Trail in a way that is very entertaining and very interesting. So did you plan that the whole time, or did that?
No.
But you had to be planning something to gather all that footage.
Right. Okay. So, how that all kind of went is I was about to leave for the trail, and a girl that I had actually known in college, she messaged me and said, hey, we should go have pizza before you leave. And I was like, okay, so we went and had pizza, and she was like, how would you feel about vlogging on the trail? And I was like, what is vlogging? I know what a blog is. I'm doing a blog, but is that the same thing as vlogging? And she's like, no, it's like, you'd have like a channel, and you'd post videos, and that way your friends and family could keep up with you. And she said, I've kind of wanted to learn to edit anyway, so I can only edit so many videos of my dog, right? And so what do you think about just while you're out there kind of recording some stuff? And I was like, that's kind of cool. Like that would be neat for me to be able to share and actually show my friends and family what's going on, and maybe children someday or whatever. And she was like, okay, well, let's do this. So I would just record videos of some of what was going on, and then I would upload it to Dropbox when I got to town, and then she pulled it off of there and just edited. And
so you're carrying a computer with you?
I did not. I did it on my phone, so
okay.
You can get the app. So I recorded everything on my phone, and then just would upload on Wi-Fi. Everything
on the AT is from your phone?
From my phone. It was like an iPhone, I don't even remember which one now, 6 or something like. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's cool, because when you go on there, you've got all these different videos, but you've got this whole trilogy of the Triple Crown, and so you've got a movie, basically a documentary, a movie. I mean, it's long.
Yeah, the
And that's
Continental
all
Divide one is-
iPhone footage.
So well, the Appalachian Trail one is just iPhone. The Pacific Crest Trail, I had, I kind of kicked it up a notch and got some attachable lenses for my phone, and just kind of upped some of the
But
the
still
equipment.
just phone, not GoPro or anything.
I did have a drone on the PCT.
Yeah,
so
I saw
yeah.
some footage. It looked
yeah,
really
and
cool.
people get a little touchy about that, because as far as like ruining people's nature experiences and whatever. But I'm like, if I'm in an area where somebody is allowed to have a motorbike, you know what I mean? Then then and the drones will only fly for 20 minutes tops. Usually it's like 15.
Which one did you have? I mean, you had to
so
be thinking about
on-
size and weight.
On
and
that one,
durability.
I had the DJI. I can't even remember which one it was now. It wasn't it was the Mavic Pro. That was it.
And that one's the one that folds up and
Yes.
it's like this big.
Yes. But for the last trail, I had the Mavic Air, which is a little bit lighter. So on the PCT, it was like a 3 or 4 pound deal. And on the CDT, it was like 2-ish pounds maybe.
Okay. So let's get back to when you just get home from the AT, and has your friend been editing these videos and putting them up while you're out there?
Yes.
And managing your
yes.
channel and
so
everything?
Once a week they were coming out, a little bit delayed because, that way to give some cushion in case I take several days off or something like that. But so she posted all through the Appalachian Trail. And then, once I got done, it was like, well, what do we do now? Like how do I keep this thing going? And so I thought, well, people started messaging me and asking me about gear. So I thought, well, why don't I do a video talking about my gear? So I did that. And then right about that time, she decided she wasn't going to edit anymore. And I was like, oh man, but I kind of want to keep this going because I felt like, if I can get out there and do this, other people can too. And how do I share this information to help other folks get out there if they decide they want to do this, or even weekend trips, And so I ran into a guy that I worked with at one of those part-time jobs. I was working at Academy Sports and Outdoors in the camping department because I was like, I know I can talk to people about camping, And so he was like, I went to school for radio, television, and film. Maybe I can help you learn to edit. And then he saw me like passing out, trying to watch him edit because I was working like 4 different jobs and trying to do a YouTube channel and whatever. And he was like, how about I just edit these for you for now, And so then when I started the PCT, he was like, okay, I guess I'm your editor now, and
Wow.
So he edited those videos.
So when your friend's putting these up on YouTube and stuff, and you're out on the trail,
Mm-hmm.
and you're going for a week at a time, maybe, I don't know.
Yeah.
And then you come back and you're like, wow, people are really watching these.
Yeah.
I mean, was it growing?
It was growing, and I basically, since I started, when I started the Appalachian Trail, I've almost every single week had a video come out, whether it's me actually backpacking or me, providing educational information so that other people can get out there and do it. Of course, people who aren't interested in backpacking still enjoy watching the videos of like what's going on out there, you know what I mean? So
Right.
so those videos tend to do better than just the information. But yeah, the channel was continuing to grow, and I mean, when I was on the Appalachian Trail, it hit 1,000 subscribers, and I remember my friend calling me, and she's like, "Hey, we hit 1,000 subscribers," and I was like, "Oh, is that good?" Because I didn't know, and she was like, "I mean, that's pretty good for this, little bit of time and everything," and so it was just weird to me. I'm like, really, people want to watch folks backpack, and I don't know, but I'm like, why not? People watch people do all sorts of things,
They like to watch people fish.
and
Tell
right,
you
and
that.
right, but like I really do enjoy capturing nature, and I've had people ask me, do you think that with you videoing things it takes away from your experience? And I'm like, no, I think it's the opposite, because it's fun to me to try to go, how can I make people feel what I'm feeling right now when I look at this field of flowers? Or if I'm freezing cold, how can I show them it's freezing cold instead of just telling them, guys, it's really cold today, and I like the slow-mo shots of butterflies flying, and I don't know, I really enjoy trying to bring the trail experience to people who either don't really care about getting out there that much, or folks that can't even, I've had a lot of older folks that used to, explore in the Sierra Nevada and, tell me that they used to love getting out there and they never thought they'd see it again. But now watching the videos, they were able to. And so that's pretty cool to me.
Well, I think that you're coming at it from a really interesting perspective. I think that the fact that you had zero experience going in and people are giving you their opinions and telling you what they think you're going to do, and probably, these are the boots you want and not those, and this is the stuff you want and not that, and listen to me, I've been doing this all my life and stuff. And so, there's like this intimidation factor, then there's this just total unknown, then some of the stuff's super expensive, and you've worked your way through all of that, and now you have as much experience as anyone.
And I don't ever preach to people like that because of the folks that did that to me.
But you came from a place of knowing absolutely nothing, and it wasn't very long ago.
No,
so you can remember what it feels like to walk into the store and look at 50 different kinds of backpacks and go, I don't even know what any of those are.
Yep.
And why would that one be $1,000 and this one's $100?
Yep.
Exactly. And so I think that some of my favorite videos that you have are the ones that it's like what I wish I knew on this stretch before I did it.
Right.
And you're giving these tips, but my son's way into your channel because he's getting ready to go on a Knowles course. He kind of had a moment like you did of, man, I just want to do something else. I mean, he's in college and everything, but he's going to go on a Knowles course in Southeast Alaska, and he's going to do the sea kayaking and the backpacking. And he just decided one night, it was over Christmas, he just said, I'm going to do this. And he didn't need to have anybody else because he had been kind of toying around with the idea that somebody would go with him or this or that. And it's kind of like, man,
I'm not
if
waiting
you want to do it.
And
that's what I had told him before. But he had to come to that realization for himself of, I'm not waiting around. I'm going to do this. And so he's pretty excited about it. But he's kind of going through this thing of, we've done some camping and stuff like that, but he hasn't done any backpacking like this. So he's coming from your perspective of really knowing nothing, walking into a store, having a budget, not being able to just buy anything he wants in there. Besides that, he doesn't even know what he wants.
Right.
So he's, and the guy at the store is telling him, oh, you need these boots. And you're like, when's the last time you were hiking in Southeast Alaska? And he's like,
now that
so
you mention it.
You know what? You need to call the Knowles guy.
Yes.
Call that guy and ask him what he thinks because that's his job and that's what he does. But find out from somebody that's actually done it, or just break them in and figure it out for yourself that they're either the right thing or the wrong thing.
No, absolutely.
So, okay, so now you have this channel. Is it making any money?
Yes.
Okay, so is that how you decided to go on the next trail, and you're funding it through your YouTube channel?
Yes, pretty much. So yeah, after the Appalachian Trail, things did grow. I was still working, like I said, a lot of part-time jobs, and I had to have that year buffer. So I did the AT in 2015, and then 2016 I just, worked so many jobs and didn't ever sleep. And then 2017 I did the Pacific Crest Trail. So
you're working all these jobs and doing your YouTube channel, all with the intention of going to the next trail?
PCT, yes.
And so where did you get the idea that that's next?
It just seemed like, well, after I did the Appalachian Trail, I was like, man, doing the Triple Crown would be pretty cool,
So is that something that people talk about? Like
it is. I was not aware of it until I was on the Appalachian Trail and heard people talk about it. And so when people say things like that to me, I'm kind of like, I wish you had never told me that, because then it's like, oh, that's another thing that I can put on my to-do list, but it's, I don't know, it's just that overachiever thing, it's like, oh man, I could just be satisfied with this, but nah, but I'd always heard that the Continental Divide Trail was the hardest of the three, because it's the least traveled and, easier to get lost and grizzly bears and, so I thought, well, I'll ease into it, so, I did the AT, and then I knew the PCT was the next most traveled. So that was why that one was next.
How did you figure out how much money it would take to do the PCT and take the time off of work? And I mean, you already had this experience of going on the AT,
right?
But did you have a financial goal that you're like, once I get there, I can go? Or did you say, on this day, I'm going regardless?
I pretty much said on this day I'm going regardless, but I knew that I was pinching pennies for sure beforehand. So I wanted to know that I would have $1,000 per month, basically. That's kind of the rule of thumb on the AT and potentially even the PCT. It's close, to be comfortable. Now, you can certainly do it for much cheaper than that. You can certainly spend a lot more money than that. But I knew, pretty much what I was looking for in the way of gear after the Appalachian Trail. So I made my upgrades and everything. And what I did is the Amazon wish list. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but so with the backpacking world, I was kind of leery because at this time, there were some companies that were like, hey, if we give you this, would you do a review on it and whatever? And I'm like, I was kind of leery of that because I know with the folks that are getting into backpacking and taking my opinion on things, I wanted to be using the gear that I wanted to because it's what I wanted to use and, not have to worry about like, do I not having to sugarcoat something, you know what I mean? Just because somebody had given it to me.
Oh, I know what you mean.
Yeah. so I was like, I don't want to deal with that. So what I did is I put all the gear that I wanted to use on Amazon wishlist and people would purchase it. And so it was kind of like, I guess you could say like private donors or, private
So they're
sponsors.
purchasing it for you, not the affiliate program.
Right. So it's just, yeah, no, I actually do have the affiliate program also though. And when I talk about gear that I've used, I'm comfortable with using affiliate links through Amazon because I'm talking about stuff that I've used. Like I would never mention something or post something, that I thought was bad and put a link to it, but so I do some of that. And I've just like slowly tried to find ways to basically monetize my hobby and continue to do it. So
God, I love that. That is so cool because like we just live in such an exciting time that that you can do that. Like YouTube and the internet and podcasts and all of these ways allow people to do things. I mean, you're basically a professional backpacker.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah. And that did not exist.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no way that existed.
No.
If you were a professional backpacker, you would be carrying something valuable from one place to another and people would pay you for your service. That would be the only way.
Right.
And now it's like you could be a professional anything with I mean, it's just a time of complete limitless possibilities.
Yeah, it is a crazy time to be alive, but I just feel like people see other people do things like that and they think, oh, that's for those people, or I could never do that. But it's like, no, you can't. Like if I can do it, you can do it, why not? Why can't other people do it? So, and nowadays, like platforms like, I don't know if you're familiar with Patreon at all. But so I have Patreon, there are just so many different ways for people who are producing content or creating content to monetize what they love, so that's
super cool. And when you like you're creating or you're capturing all this content, and then this other guy that you were working with is now the editor of the PCT stuff, and so you're doing the same kind of deal. You're just putting it on Dropbox, and he's picking it up, and this thing's growing even more while you're on the PCT trail.
Yes.
And are you surprised when you come into
Yes.
little cities or whatever?
Yes, because it just kept going, and I was like, wow, like even though this trail is a little less traveled, I'm still getting more traffic on the channel, and I don't know, it blew my mind, and I remember Aaron saying like one day you'll hit 100,000 subscribers, and I was like, nah, I doubt that. I was like, the backpacking community is so small, like not that many people are going to be interested in this. And he's like, no, I really think it'll happen. And so when I went to start the CDT this past year in 2018, he said to me, I don't want to just watch anymore. And I was like, what do you mean? And he was like, well, I kind of want to go on one of these trips. And I was like, I don't know how I feel about that, because like, how are you going to edit and backpack and, everything? And he's like, I don't know, but I could also help capture things, like you're never really in the videos, unless you're like selfie mode, because, you're the one always with the camera. And he's like, what if I went and kind of captured some of that too? And I was like, that does add a different dimension to it. And so I was like, but you've never done a backpacking trip, and he said, well, you hadn't either before the
Right.
AT. And I was like, okay, this
Burn
is exactly
on you.
what, exactly. Like, this is exactly what I preach to people, is that you can do it. And I was like, I can't believe you're going to do the hardest of the 3 Triple Crown trails as your first backpacking trip, but let's do it. Let's go. And he did it.
So did you encourage him to get in shape and break in his boots and get the right gear and all that stuff, or did he just do exactly what you did?
He pretty much did the same. I mean, I don't think that he was. I think that he was walking a lot more. Actually, it kind of worked out for the best, but his car broke down right before he left, and so he was having to walk to Dollar General to get groceries and stuff like that. So he would just put a pack on and then go get his groceries and then walk back to his house. So he was getting a little walking in just before, but not too much. But he knew about gear, in pretty good detail, just because he had been editing videos at that point for a while,
Our editors become expert fishermen without ever
without ever
catching a
wetting the
fish.
line. Yeah. Exactly.
Well, that is super cool. So the Pacific, I mean, we're just kind of glossing over the Pacific Crest Trail, but that is just an incredibly beautiful area, and
It really
and it
is.
takes you a tremendous. Is that a same length of time? Is that a 6-month trail?
It is. It took me right about 6 months. And even though it's a little bit more, I was worried about that. I was like, man, the AT took me almost 6.5 months, and I finished on a snowy, icy Katahdin, and I didn't even know what crampons or microspikes were, so I didn't have those finishing. I should have. But so then I get out on the PCT, and the game kind of changed a little bit because it was a longer trail, but it is, there's a lot less elevation change. So the AT has the most up, down, even though in general you're at a lower elevation than on the Pacific Crest Trail. And so, but then I'm like, what are microspikes? Why do I have to have an ice axe? What do you mean self-arresting? So I had to learn about all that. And so again, it was kind of another exciting adventure because it was throwing myself into, a different trail where you have to have different skill sets. And not to mention 2017 was like the highest snow year recorded, and I don't even remember how long, it was like a 200% snow year or something in the Sierra Nevada. So I'm going through, the problem isn't the snow so much. I mean, that is an issue, but when snow melts, it turns into raging rivers where it used to be like a cute little trickle of a stream. And so, I mean, literally had to swim two of the rivers. There was one where I was by myself and I thought I was not going to make it across. Well, I made it halfway and I ended up turning back, and I was very glad to get back. And it used to make me nauseous to think about it.
And how far away from civilization are you? Way out there.
Yes, and no service. I mean, you can forget even hoping for a bar of service. And I didn't intend. That was the one section that I did not want to be alone for. I remember when I started the PCT, my 2 biggest concerns were rattlesnakes in the desert, which I saw 10, didn't get bit, and also the Sierra Nevada and being alone because of the high snow year. And so I was around other people, and there were 4 of us that left town together. And when it gets kind of sketchy like that, people tend to group up, out of necessity.
Yeah.
So 4 of us we got back on trail together, and we had agreed that we were going to camp right below one of the passes. And so I took my time and I actually went fishing. I had a little tenkara rod. So I was fishing in one of the little ponds there or lake, whatever. But I went to go catch up with them because I knew we weren't doing that many miles that day. And the only guy that was camped where we said we would meet was an Australian guy. And I was like, where did the other 2 go? And he said, oh, they decided to go up and over the pass today. And I was like, well, I guess it's just me and you then, So the next morning we woke up and you try to get up and over those passes early while the snow is still hard. That way your microspikes or crampons bite into the snow instead of it being slushy and slippery. So we go up and over, and he looks in the valley and he's like, wow, there's way more snow in this valley than I thought there would be. And I was like, it's a 200% snow year. What'd you think? And he's like, I don't know if I can do this. And I'm like, are you thinking about going back? And he said, yeah, I think so. And he's like, how are you going to feel if I do that? And I was like, no, don't ask me, this is a decision you have to make for yourself. Because I'm thinking, of course, I don't want this guy to leave, but if he stays and like drowns in a river, I don't want that on me,
Yeah.
on my conscience that like I guilted him into staying. So of course I didn't say much. And he was like, yeah, I'm going to go back.
What does going back mean at that
like
moment?
turn around and go back to the road crossing.
But how far is that?
Oh, it was only at that point like 12 miles or something probably.
Well, that's a pretty significant decision.
It is. But, and that's why it was like he could go back 12 miles or continue like 80, to the next stretch, the next
So
bailout
at that point, you see people, I don't know if you call that quitting or if you just call that, I don't know if I want it as bad as I thought I did.
Right. Is it worth risking my life for?
Right. And he's probably got, I don't know, kids, other things that he's thinking about.
Yeah.
And
wasn't worth
maybe
it.
I really didn't want to do this that bad. Did you ever have those moments to where you thought?
I mean, certainly, that river crossing later that day that I was talking about, I really felt my legs giving in. And I was like, well, this is where I become an obituary in the paper. It was like the strangest thought. Like,
They still got to find you.
Yeah. this is where I become a mystery, or whatever. Yeah. But, I mean, when I turned around and got to the other side of the bank and I just laid there and cried like a little girl for a while, and was kind of upset at myself at the same time for taking that risk, because I was like, I could have camped right here and waited till the next morning like I ended up doing, instead of being so stubborn. And I promised myself at that point that if I'm going to do this, then I need to slow down and do it as safely as possible, because the problem with taking too much time is that you don't get to Canada before the snow hits. So although I want to like get through this part of the trail and hurry up and get to Canada, because I'm kind of, on a time limit there, you also have to do it in a smart way, and safe. So I stopped and I camped right there, and within 30 minutes, these 4 guys showed up, and they were thinking about crossing too, and then they decided, no, we'll wait, because a lot of times when you wait it out, and you probably know this, the water level is usually lower in the morning than it is late in the evening, because the snow and ice refreezes. So sure enough, it was a little bit calmer in the morning for all of us, but I hiked with the rest of the 4 of them for the rest of that Sierra Nevada stretch, and we all looked out for one another. So it's funny how like the worst days sometimes can turn into really good ones, But
so many metaphors for life.
Yes.
I mean, gosh.
Yes. So many lessons that you learn on the trail just relate right to regular life. It's pretty crazy.
Yeah. And so let's just finish the PCT. That went well for the rest of it, and then you're done with that, and then what?
Well, then I knew it was 1 or 3. So as soon as I stepped foot on the PCT, I knew I had to do the Continental Divide Trail. So this time between the PCT and the CDT, I didn't take off a year break. I finished in October on the PCT, and by the beginning of April, I was out on the CDT. So it was like a 6-month break, And
again, did you decide that this is just something you're doing and you're not concerned about who's going with you? Or
yes, absolutely.
Do you form a little group?
I did. I didn't really have in the Sierra with those guys. They were like my brothers. So and what we call that on the trail is tramily. It's like trail family.
Yeah.
But we all kind of split off, after that period. That's just how it happens. You group up and then you kind of split off, and then you might group up again or with other people. But for the CDT, I knew that was going to be a pretty desolate trail. But I had a friend that I met on the Appalachian Trail, and he started the Pacific Crest Trail at the same time as I did. But each trail I've had a graduation to go home for, one of my siblings. So he hiked on the PCT. His name is Perk. That's his trail name, because he carried a percolator on the Appalachian Trail. So so Perk and I started the PCT together, which was kind of cool. But we didn't stay together necessarily the whole time. We kind of hike alone together. You know what I mean? Like we're very independent, but we do kind of look out for one another. So he also started the Continental Divide Trail the same day I did. So it was kind of nice having somebody to start with, somebody to be nervous with. And
well, so of the 3, and I don't know much other than I've spent a fair bit of time in Yellowstone and the Grand Teton National Park and Glacier National Park.
Beautiful.
So that's on the northern end of where you're going. But it seems to me like that would be the one that would give me pause personally
CDT.
of of just kind of there just seems to be there seems to be a little more natural danger maybe, but I don't know anything about the PCT. So, you have wildlife, you have really high mountains, you have, exposure.
Yes.
You
Lightning.
have, lots of temperature drops. I mean, the nighttime out there, even in the summer, gets very, very cold.
Yes.
So, any special preparation for this one, or you're just? I mean,
Not
you're
too
obviously.
much.
I mean, at this point, you're almost 5,000 miles into it. You're pretty well
Right.
seasoned. You got as much experience as anybody. You're gonna know.
Well, and luckily, a little at a time, each trail kind of taught me something different. So on the PCT, I also had to deal with desert. It was 700 miles of desert. Now, the PCT desert isn't the cliche like desert that you think of where you have absolutely no shade, but the CDT is more like that, So also the Pacific Crest Trail Desert still had some natural water sources where there are some on the CDT, but some of those water sources are cow ponds. So you've got a cow standing in the water, going to the bathroom, and you're like, I'm going to scoop this water and
Did you ever
drink
get
it now.
sick?
No, we use Sawyer squeeze filters. I don't know.
Does
what
that
you use.
work?
Yeah, I mean, so far.
Well, you would know
So
real
far,
quick.
yeah,
I got Giardia
Oh,
one
did
summer,
you?
and it is no joke. And it's not like I think I might have Giardia.
No, you do like a goose. I mean,
Yeah,
sorry for the
boy, no,
graphic,
you do.
but you do
And
like a
I
goose.
was still courting my wife while we were, we were dating,
This is so great.
and there were times when we were in the drift boat going down the river, and I've got Giardia, and there's no choice. I mean, when you gotta go, you gotta go. So.
Yeah.
I knew at that point that she was probably the one.
That she was a keeper
if she could handle that, then it was all going to be fine. But when you have Giardia, and if you drink from the wrong water source, it does not take long. So
Yes.
you're drinking from a lot of natural water sources.
Yes.
No, so with the advancements of those filters and stuff, has that led to more people doing that trail? Like,
I don't know.
I mean, 20 years ago, we didn't have those kind of filters.
Yeah,
You're boiling
I mean, you
water,
could use
iodine,
bleach.
or bleach or something like that.
And I did actually. My filter froze one night, and so I had to be a little selective at that point and be a little careful and boil some water. And I borrowed my friend Perk's filter for a couple sources, but then I hightailed it into town and got some bleach, as soon as I could, until I could get another filter ordered and sent out to the trail, but. I mean, it's certainly more convenient. It's more lightweight than some of the pumps and stuff that, people used to use. But yeah, that was just one of the challenges with that trail. You're absolutely right. The exposure is more so too on the PCT than the AT. On the AT, it's like the green tunnel, you're always in trees. But the CDT, when we captured this too, we were up in Colorado and at least 2 or 3 miles from any kind of tree line, up 13,000 feet or so. And I heard something buzzing, and I had my trekking poles kind of tucked under my arm. And I heard something buzzing, and I'm like, is that a bug? And I'm looking around and everything. And then I realized, I'm like, no, it's the tips of my trekking poles buzzing. And so I'm like holding my trekking poles, and I hear bzzz, and I'm like, and then I finally catch out the corner of my eye, my hair is standing up. And I mean, sure enough, we'd kind of been hearing some thunder, but there's not much that you can do except go,
Right.
Or, I mean, I know they have the lightning stance and all that, but I just wanted to get to tree line. I just wanted to hide up under some trees, And but I knew it was 2 or 3 miles either way. So my best thinking is just get up and over this thing. And so I looked at Aaron and I was like, Aaron, do you hear that? My trekking poles are buzzing, and that's the guy that edits.
Mm-hmm.
But anyhow, and he started laughing and he's like, look at your hair. And I was like, this is not funny. Like, you don't understand how not funny this is right now. He's like, it'll be funny later. I'm like, if we live, like, you don't really, this is a sign that you could easily be struck by lightning any minute. So we just ran as fast as we could and got down off the mountain. But
before he took a picture, because I think I've seen
he
that picture on your Instagram.
He did, and it was not funny, I mean, it is funny now. He's right about that, but and you could see the look on my face. I'm like probably fussing him out, like, this is not funny right now.
It's not funny, and that same thing happens with fishing rods. You hear the end of the fishing rod buzzing. If you lift it up, it buzzes really a lot.
Yeah,
And if
it
you put
does.
it down, it doesn't buzz.
Right.
And then you can see, a lot of times boats get struck by lightning, and if they hit a fishing rod, you can look on Instagram, and it's no joke. It melts
Yeah.
everything.
Yeah.
So you
I-
definitely don't want to get struck by lightning.
No, and also I met a mountain lion on the CDT. That was another fun event. So I was like that was actually in the desert in New Mexico, but I had been going uphill, and I'm kind of slow on the uphills. But once I start going downhill, I like pick up the pace. And so I had been in the sun, and I got up under some trees and started going downhill. And a lot of the CDT goes through cattle country, so you've got cows all around. Well, I see this thing jump up out of the dirt, near the trail, and I'm like, what is that? Is that a calf? And I'm like, no, is that a big dog? And then I realized that is a mountain lion.
Wow.
And I mean, it was rather close. Like I know everyone can't see the table in there, but from here to there, however far you'd say that
Really?
is, yes,
20 feet.
Yeah, it was there, and I was like, okay, what do I do right now? And so
And you're alone by
yes,
yourself?
I was alone, and so I just kind of hollered at it. I was like, "Go and get out of here," and tried to sound like my old pawpaw self, try to sound intimidating. It was not intimidating at all. And so it just like kind of stared at me, and just flicking its tail and whatever. And I just didn't know what to do. I don't know why this came to my mind, but I had harmonica, and I know how to play like Mary Had a Little Lamb on it, but I'd been practicing. And so I had it in my little pocket here on my shoulder strap. And so I pulled it out and blew on it. And I was like, maybe just the sound of something strange to it will scare it off. And when I did that, it kind of took a step towards me, but then it did start backing up. But for a minute, I was like, what if I sounded like a dying bird or something? What if it made me sound like tasty, like lunch or something, And, but anyway, it finally, the whole thing was at least a minute and a half because I recorded it with my phone. So I know how long it was.
That's super
But
scary.
we just stared at each other, and then it finally ran off.
And what state is that in?
New Mexico. Yeah.
Wow, so that's pretty early in the trip.
Yes. I was like, oh, this is setting the tone for how the trip's going to go. That's great.
Wow, a mountain lion.
Yep.
That's one that is super scary because I
Yeah.
don't, I've been around grizzly bears, and I have a super healthy respect for them.
Yes.
And
absolutely.
I will even go so far as to say that I'm terrified of them.
Oh, I agree.
But there's a serious respect there. But I've seen them a lot, and I would have no idea. I don't know what to do with mountain lions.
Right. Same. So my first experience with a bear on the Appalachian Trail, one bluff charged me. So
Really?
yes. And then like the other 6 that I saw, I handled absolutely fine, but it was my fault. It was an aggressive bear. The area was closed for camping because of probably this aggressive bear. And we were still able to hike through, but, it came towards us, and I didn't realize that bears aren't really supposed to act like that because again, I had no experience with bears, but luckily I was around a group of people, and they're like, this bear shouldn't be coming towards us like this. It should be running away. And we were scooping water out of a water source, and it was kind of like behind a tree. So I stepped to the side, but kind of towards it a little bit to kind of see it better. And when I did, it shot its head up and looked at me, and I kind of kneeled down and I said, hey darling, like, it's not a puppy, it's a bear, but I just didn't have any idea of how to act around bears. I mean, that's, and I had read what you're supposed to do, and and I didn't follow any of the rules, but when that thing started coming at me, I mean, the thing about a bluff charge is you don't necessarily know it's a bluff charge until it stops, right?
Yeah.
So this bear comes running at me, and what you're not supposed to do is run. So the first thing I started doing was turning around to take off and run. And then everyone in the group was like, don't run. And I'm like, oh yeah, and it's like it hit me at that point, everything I'd read, and I'm like, you're an idiot. I can't believe that you just handled this situation like that. But I turned around and like held up my trekking poles and like stood my ground, and it finally like stopped and threw its arms up at me, and it kind of hissed like a cat. It was like, and it was close enough that I could see its hair was up on its back. Yes. And we just stood there looking at each other, and finally it kind of got down and started messing with a blueberry bush or something, and we took off. So I'd had that experience with the bear in my mind for this mountain lion experience. But again, mountain lions and bears are not the same creature, right? So, but I think the same kind of thing is important, just to look big. You don't want to squat down. You don't want to duck down. You don't want to turn your back to it. You want to, appear large and intimidating rather than intimidated. But that's kind of hard to do in the moment sometimes,
I guess so. Certainly by yourself, a long way away from anybody, and you also kind of surprised it, and it surprised you.
Yes.
So you're probably coming, with the wind in the favorable direction if you're a hunter,
Right.
not a favorable direction if you're a hiker,
Right.
because
Because
if the
I
wind's
snuck
in
up
your
on
face,
it, right.
he can't smell you,
Right.
right? So
Exactly.
and they can smell really well, and if it had smelled you,
It wouldn't have been there.
you would have walked by and it would have been looking at you,
Right.
but you would have
I
never.
wouldn't have. I know, and
No.
I wondered. I'm like, how many saw me that I didn't see? You never know. But.
So what about when you go to Yellowstone on this CDT? What did you think about? I mean,
It was amazing.
had you ever been there before?
I had not.
So
I had
your
not.
your first experience with Yellowstone is just walking through, and where does the CDT enter the park? Do you know?
It's I don't know exactly. I know I passed by Heart Lake. Does that sound
Okay, yeah.
familiar? I'm trying to, and then you do go into
Ashton?
no, it goes into Old Faithful Village.
Okay. Yeah.
And
So
then it cuts off to like you do all
that's
those
the thoroughfare
walkways with
trail. Is that the thoroughfare trail?
I'm not sure.
Did
what
it go
it's
by
called,
Did it go by the Yellowstone Lake?
I guess I went by so many lakes.
So
I know
there's
it's
there's on the if you're looking at it on the western side, there's Ashton, and you can go from kind of Ashton. You can do the Beckler region, which has tons of waterfalls, and then you go up to Old Faithful.
okay.
And that's probably, if you said you went
Maybe.
to
I
Old
didn't
Faithful
see a
and
bunch of
then kind of
waterfalls.
come over there like that. But I'll have to look at it on the map. But I've done that Beckler region, which is
Okay.
just absolutely gorgeous.
Have you seen Lone Star Geyser?
Yeah.
It goes like within 0.2 of Lone Star Geyser. Like
Okay.
you walk next to it. So that was my favorite geyser, I think, in the
Mhm.
whole park. I really enjoyed it. I about posted a picture today of eating some Fruit Loops while I was sitting there watching that one erupt.
Yeah,
but
some of the backcountry geysers are, if you hit them right, and sometimes you're hiking through there and you have no idea that doesn't go off every hour, and you get back there and it's going off, and then you read about it and it's like maybe it goes off every month, or maybe it
right.
goes off, and you just happen to go
You just
by when
happen
this
to-
thing just goes. And I've walked by this one called a Kindness, and it's a very infrequent one, and it starts out as just a hole in the ground, a dry, hot hole in the ground, and then it just slowly fills up like a hot tub,
Yeah.
and then it just looks like it's just going to be a hot
pool thing.
pool
yeah.
of water, and then it starts bubbling. And I went there with my dad, and we're like, oh well, we'll just have a sandwich right here, and we watched this thing fill up, and then we watched it start bubbling, and then it went off for about an hour.
Oh my gosh,
And
that is
then
so
I
cool.
was like, well, that's my favorite one I've
Yeah.
ever seen. And then I go and read about it, and it doesn't go off that much. And so we just experienced this really cool thing
that
together.
you just happened to be there at the right time.
Right, I know.
Yeah.
It was amazing.
Yeah.
So did you have any problems with wildlife in the park? Because there's all kinds of it.
There are a lot of different things there. I actually, the first grizzly bear I saw was just south of the park. I'm trying to think of what that creek is called, but like Weasel Creek or something. I can't remember, but it was probably like 10 miles south of the park or so. Maybe a little less than that. But I was ahead of Aaron. We were hiking near each other that day. Who's probably half a mile behind. And I got to this creek, and I was about to go Mink Creek. That's what it was. I was about to go across it, and whenever I approach water and like all of those willows and stuff like that, I'm always like, hey bear, because you think about if you're sitting right next to that running water source, you can barely hear somebody
know.
come walking up. So they can't either. And so I always holler out, and I don't care if I sound like a crazy person or not, or I'll sing, or I'll, always make noise. And so same thing, I got there and kind of hollered out, and I saw across the water, the grizzly bear just kind of like walked through the trees, and I could see its silhouette and clearly see the hump, and everything. And so it just went on by, moseyed on down, and I was like, wow, because that was the thing that I was worried about on the CDT were grizzlies. And I was just like, I know I'm just going to get up there close to the border of Canada and get eaten by a grizzly bear, and that's how it's all going to end, But so I was excited to have seen one alone and have just been like, well, it just happened, I don't know. It's such a cool feeling though to see them and to realize the power, behind them, and how small you really are. It's a rush. It's
right,
a rush.
how small you are, and then compared to the bear that you saw on the Appalachian Trail,
Right.
this thing is, I mean, literally the first one that I ever saw, I thought I saw a mother with cubs, the first one that I saw close up. and I thought the cub was the adult bear.
Yes.
And it walks by, and it's framed in trees, and so there's willows and stuff like that, and then there's an open spot. So the bear walks right through there, and I'm like, oh, there's a grizzly bear.
Yeah.
Well, then here comes another one.
Oh.
Okay, and then so I'm focused in on this thing that's like this big. Well, then something this big walks into the same thing, and it really, really freaked me out because I thought the baby was the
big
mom.
one.
And then all of a sudden, it's like you're focused in on a skateboard, and then a pickup truck drives through, and you're like, whoa.
Like, yeah,
It scared me to death.
Yeah.
It really, really did. And it gave me just such an incredible, healthy respect for them.
Respect for them, yes.
Yeah. But then, so how are you managing all your food in the park and eating? I mean, that's really where it comes down to. Is like, this thing can smell like 10,000 times better than a dog.
Right. Right. So, I mean, luckily in the national parks like that, like Yellowstone and Glacier, they have hangs, and they have, certain campsites. But it's really interesting to me how some of the information is conflicting. So if you look at like the recommended way to handle grizzlies, it's like, don't camp somewhere where there has been grizzly activity lately. But when I got my permit for Yellowstone and also in Glacier, they told me in both parks, oh, this campsite that you're going to be at is known for high grizzly activity. So just make sure you follow all the rules. And I'm like, but that's one right there that, if you're telling me, you're telling me that there are going to be grizzlies, they're like, well, so far it's been good interactions. And I'm like, okay. And it was fine. And actually at the one in Glacier where they told me there was high bear activity, and there was also a sign posted, sure enough, that morning leaving camp, I saw one, but but I didn't have any bad experiences with the grizzlies. So, it's very eerie seeing their tracks and, wolf tracks too, following, especially not hiking. I followed some wolf tracks for like 2 or 3 miles, and I was like,
so
man.
What's the strategy on the night hiking?
Just
like, why are you even doing it?
right. On the Appalachian Trail, I did some night hiking to try to catch up with people.
Okay, I get that. On the CDT.
On the CDT.
In the northern CDT.
Because I was trying to get to Canada before the snow dumped on me too much. Yeah. So, I not hiking in grizzly country is not necessarily something I want to do as, a pastime. But
well, a lot of people do it. I mean, when my niece was working in Yellowstone, and she used to tell me they would go night hiking all the time, and I'm like,
why?
Yeah.
Like, you do see
really?
some cool things sometimes, some different critters you wouldn't necessarily see.
The stars are amazing.
Yes. And luckily I never spotlighted a grizzly in the middle of the night. I think I might have just died right there if that had happened. Because, and I remember being a little girl and learning about grizzly bears in like first grade or something. And thinking, why on earth would anyone ever put themselves in a situation to be harmed by this animal, And then I'm like, oh, well, I guess I get it now.
Because it's incredibly beautiful out there, and you want to see it, and there's only one way to see it, is on foot.
Yeah.
In a lot of those places. I mean,
a lot of them, yeah.
Some of them you can take courses, but really to get back into some of those places, the only way to do it is by foot.
Yeah.
And if you want to really see it, it's an overnight trip.
Yep.
Or 2,
exactly.
or 3,
or
the whole thing.
Or 5, or whatever, yeah.
Gosh, I mean, what you have done is just, it's really, really incredible. I mean, you have seen the most beautiful parts of this country on foot.
They are incredible.
And you've figured out a way to do it and get paid for it, at least enough to continue to do it.
Yep.
And I mean, kudos to you. That is just it's amazing, and it's so cool to see that you could just do that, coming from a place of just I'm not going to settle for this.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. Sometimes I'm like, did this really happen? That's why I said it kind of happened by accident, but not at the same time. I don't want to say like I haven't worked hard for because I have certainly. Not had a lot of sleep at times, because I'm like, I'm continuing this, I'm doing this, but it's finally gotten built up enough now to where I'm like, okay, this is all really been worth it. And I've seen some incredible things, and, in moving forward, I'm, that's not it. It doesn't end with the triple crown of backpacking. There's more to come.
So you went through college, you get your degree, you go and you get a couple jobs, you end up in this oil field, and you here it is, you've arrived, so to speak, but you're not happy. So now you're thinking, well, maybe this will do it. And
Yeah.
so you hike the Appalachian Trail, then you hike the PCT, now you hike the CDT, and you've got this Triple Crown. Is there any feeling of,
Accomplishment?
well, I mean, of course there's going to be
Yeah.
accomplishment, but like,
Like, do I feel fulfilled?
yeah, or is there more,
There's
or
more.
or are you thinking there's more, but it's a different adventure?
Yeah. I mean, some of that, I'm not opposed to different. So I've thought of even like floating the Mississippi and capturing that, and maybe even doing some bike trips. I mean, so I'm 30. I'll be 33 this year. Like, I would like to have a family someday. You know what I mean? And that's not something I've ever been like impatient for. But now I'm like, okay, eventually that would kind of be nice. But I think even if I have children, things would just morph into, well, this is how you adventure with children, because I don't see myself stopping, as long as I can continue to go and explore and do different adventures. I want to continue that. They might be a little bit different. I can't say everything will be backpacking, but so moving forward this year, in the summer, my mother, she will be 60 in June, and she's never been on a backpacking trip. So there were some fire closures on the Pacific Crest Trail that I could not go through, legally or potentially safely even. So I'm going to fill those in this summer with her, and I think we're going to probably end up doing about 400 to 500 miles or so, just because I want her to see some of the other stuff too. So
Just 400 miles.
yeah, right. But it's going to be so nice just to go, I really like this lake. Let's just stay here tonight, to
Yeah.
kind of have a little bit more time to really enjoy it. And we're also taking one of my dogs with me. So that's going to be a different perspective of like, okay, so this is how I backpack with a dog. And then, hopefully people who are wanting to do that, I can offer a little bit more insight into that. And then later in the fall of this year, my sister, who's 19, and I are going to Spain to do the Camino de Santiago.
Yeah, I know about that.
So it's more of a like hostel to hostel, town to town kind of thing, but so it's more of like a cultural experience. And then on the radar in the near-ish future, there's a trail in New Zealand called, I believe it's the Te Araroa. I always feel like I say that wrong, but so it's like an 1,800 mile trip again. So that'll be similar to something like the AT. So that one will be my next like longer trip. So
That sounds amazing.
yeah, I'm really excited
God,
about
I
that.
could,
So
I could go on that one.
yeah,
That is New Zealand is so high on my list
yeah.
of places to go. I went to Australia.
Have you?
Australia is phenomenal. I loved it. I mean, there's just a few places that I've been where within just a little while, maybe within 24 hours, kind of like, man, I could live here.
Yeah.
Like, I like the people. I like the place. I like the vegetation. I like the climate. I like the ability to just explore forever. Hawaii was like that. I mean, I thought Hawaii was amazing.
What island?
Well, I've only been to the Big Island
Okay.
there, but even there are hiking, backpacking trails all over.
Right.
You hike to the ocean, back up into these rivers, on top of mountains, down.
Right.
You can go surfing in the morning. You can go.
Go see a volcano.
It's amazing. I mean, there is just so much there. And then when you look at all these other islands, you can just only imagine what else is there. So
Right.
that place, and like if you're a good surfer, you can surf this break. And if you're a beginner, there's perfect waves over here. And it just
Yeah.
seems like, and then the fishing is phenomenal. And it just seems like that's a really, really good place. And Australia, I felt the same way there. I feel the same way in Yellowstone. I mean, Yellowstone is one of these places where, and I don't know if you experienced this or not, but when I got there, and every time I've ever been to Yellowstone, there is this energy I feel there that is just almost indescribable, but it's just like,
It's pretty magical.
wow.
Yeah.
Like, I feel it here.
Well, imagine if you had been the person who walked up on Yellowstone and was like, "Is the world ending?" Like,
Jim
you know what I mean?
Bridger.
Like, yeah, like
Jim Bridger and John Coulter. I
you
mean,
walk up
you
there
read
and
those
you're just
books.
like, what is happening? And I mean, a place that like is warm, the ground is warm all the time already steals my heart because like I'm cold natured, you know.
Yeah.
So a place that I can walk through and I'm like, wow, it's pretty hot right here, you know, that it's like just radiating up from the ground, even
If
when
it
the air
didn't
is
smell
cold.
like eggs, it would be, it would be amazing.
Just imagine egg salad sandwiches though, and you're good. You're good.
Yeah.
No, yeah, it was. I really thought it was magical. It was pretty great, and it wasn't that. And I know there are a lot of other areas that I didn't get to explore, but to me, it wasn't the like, oh my gosh, these mountains are so, you know, epic or whatever. It wasn't that. It was like in a different way. I don't know. It felt like something you would see in outer space or something. I don't know. It's just weird. It's like nothing I've ever seen before.
I know. And then there's so much wildlife and I don't
Yes.
know the way that you're doing it, and I don't know what month you went through there, but you're going through there, and it is a magical place because you're probably not seeing anyone in ratio to how many people are actually there.
Right.
And if you go there in May, you see almost no one. If you go there in September, you see almost no one. If you go there in June, July, and August, you see a lot of people. I mean,
Right.
a lot.
Yeah. And there were a lot of folks, you know, like Old Faithful and stuff like that, of course. But I feel like a lot of people don't want to get out and explore and anything that they have to like walk too far to go check
Right.
out, you know.
Well, there's a couple of things going on there. First of all, Yellowstone is the size of a state. I mean, it is a huge,
Yeah.
huge place,
Yeah,
and
it's
people don't
massive.
realize that. They
Yeah.
look at it and they think, oh, well, there's basically two, figure eight loop that splinters off into these different exits, but it's
Right.
basically, two circles of a road that's up and a lower loop, an upper loop and a lower loop.
Yes.
And people think, well, we'll just go do Yellowstone today. Well, to do either one of those loops is absolutely a full day.
Yeah.
If you walk down the boardwalk, that's all you get, and you better get back in the car and keep going
Right.
because you're not going to make it through the whole day.
No.
And then you probably left out of Jackson, Wyoming or somewhere, so it's a 2-hour drive up.
Right.
Now you're trying to do the loop and back down.
Right.
I mean, that is a major day of driving.
Yeah.
And so people, I think, get started and they have great intentions of going to places and hiking and doing stuff,
Right.
but they get up there and they're like, oh, this is way bigger than I thought
Right.
it was.
And you run out of time.
Yeah,
for
you
sure.
run out of time super quick.
I had to hitchhike. That was I will say, I was so frustrated. That was one of the hardest places to hitchhike. Because when we're going
Was?
to towns, yes. And what I think it is a lot of the trail towns, so the towns that are near the AT or the PCT or the CDT, those people are familiar with seeing backpackers and know what we're doing. Like this person, it's not like this person looks homeless. It's like this person is a backpacker. Like you can tell.
Right.
And so, I don't know. I guess because a lot of these folks were on vacation with their families and, you know, may have children and they don't want to pick up some stranger with children.
But you usually
So I
have park
get it.
employees that'll pick you up or
Right,
whatever. They know
right.
what's up.
Well, and I had 2 ingrown infected toenails at that time. So I really
Nice.
needed to it was so gross. I really needed to get to the clinic and get like some antibiotics and get them checked out and everything. And, yeah, it was pretty gnarly, but I just needed something to hold me over until I could get to a proper podiatrist and get them like cut out and whatever. But
That is such a painful thing.
oh, it was bad. It was, and I knew that I had one of the ingrown toenails in New Mexico, and I was just like, oh well, I just have
And
to
so
deal with
you
this.
walked to Wyoming before you you thought
Well,
you
I was
might
in
go to the
Montana
clinic?
before I got it cut out because I actually ended up making it through all of Wyoming, Idaho, and then I was in Montana before I finally got to a podiatrist and they cut him out. It was pretty
What
miserable.
town in Montana did you
It
end
was
up in?
I think it was Anaconda that I ended up.
I don't even know
Yeah.
Anaconda.
Yeah.
Wow. My
It's-
son's in Big Sky. Or Bozeman. I'm sorry.
Okay.
So to wrap this all up, I think a lot of people watch your YouTube videos and they're going on the website. They're gonna have some that are just interested in taking the backpack trip, and you're looking at this like we talked about with a different perspective. Like I understand your challenges and you don't know what you're doing, and that's cool, and it's very easy. If I can do it, you can do it.
Yeah.
But then there's this other group that you're talking to, I think, and those are people that have this nagging kind of bellyache of settling for wherever they are in their
Yeah.
life, and they see that you changed it and you made this change. And maybe they don't want to go hiking, but maybe they want to take this change.
Something else. Yes.
Right. So what do you take away from your experiences, really all three, and this whole journey of changing your life? What kind of advice do you give people? And I'm sure you have a lot of people
Oh, yeah.
sending you emails asking you for advice, like I want to quit this job, I don't know what to do. What kind of advice are you giving?
Well, so I think like one of the biggest lessons that I've taken away from everything is learning what to channel your energy into. So you don't have like all the energy in the world, right? You have limited amount of like cares to give. So learning to focus on things that you can actually influence or change in your life. So for example, I can be mad because it's raining while I'm hiking, but that's not going to change, you know, and I've just put all this energy into being upset about the rain or the wind or whatever, you know. So learning to really focus on things in life that you can actually affect, you know, influence or change. Then also, I think when you want to make a big change in your life, you just have to stop, like we talked about earlier, that like analysis paralysis. You just have to go for it. You just have to take that step. And even if it's just one step, you know, so with backpacking, you know, go out and buy a water filter. It's about $40, you know, that's your first piece of gear. Then you've made that initial step, you know. Or if it's you're wanting to start some other business, you know what I mean? Get that first piece of equipment or get what, you know, I think just making yourself take that first step and showing yourself like I am committed to this thing and I'm actually going to do it. And kind of keep a check on that back burner, because I feel like everybody pushes all these things to the back burner. And if you're not feeling happy in life, you can kind of reflect back on like, what were my goals and my dreams and things that I wanted to do before I was told like, you can't live your life like that, you know, and kind of evaluate that and look and see, is that something that I can incorporate into my life, you know? And I don't think it's ever too soon to start planning for something different. You know what I mean? I feel like especially the older people get in life, they're like, well, I can't quit this job and start my own business now, or I can't be an entrepreneur, you know, I'm already 50 or whatever. And it's not like that. Like then one day you're going to look back at 70, you know, 20 years ago and go, golly, why didn't I do that? You know? And so I think that just to quit, making excuses and just do it, you know, whatever it is, whatever that thing is for somebody.
Even if the first couple of steps are wrong.
Yes.
Right? At least you're taking steps.
I mean, you can look at the channel, my videos from the AT versus, you know, the CDT, and they're like night and day, you know? So if somebody wants to start a podcast, it doesn't have to be perfect, you know, you just have to do it, because to start with, nobody cares, you know, nobody's listening, nobody.
This, what we're doing right now is a great example. I sat around thinking for a year, I think I'd like to have a podcast. Like, I think I could do a good job on a podcast. There's a lot of people I'd like to ask to sit down and talk to. And I just thought about it, and I got wrapped up. And I'm a guy that has started numerous businesses and has done lots of stuff. And I'm very happy with my life. Like, I couldn't be any happier with my life. I'm not, but here I am getting caught in exactly the same thing on a very simple project. Like, so
you just
finally one day I just said, you know what, I'm just buying this and this and this. And if it's wrong, whatever.
I'll fix it.
And it was wrong. And it was wrong. It wasn't it wasn't what I have now. And this is way better.
Right.
But
you don't know until you get out there and do it.
You don't.
And I think too, the other thing that I've really kind of taken away is like, if you don't design your life how you want it to be, somebody else will. Like, you will fall into somebody else's default design for your life, you know, whether that's society or your mom or your spouse or your whatever, you know, you have to take control of it and you have to drive it. And if you don't, then, you know, then it'll be driven for you. So, and I don't like that. I don't like somebody else driving my car, you know, I'm going to drive it. So,
What do you think about, and I'm sure that you encountered this, even though you said that your mom was really super supportive, but a lot of times when somebody has some kind of crazy goal that they want to do or they set for themselves, or just, I don't know, somebody that's, I mean, I just read this book by David Goggins. He had to lose 100 pounds by this certain date so that he could be a Navy SEAL. And he's terribly out of shape, and he's spraying for cockroaches, and it's an impossible goal.
Right.
But he decided he's going to do it. But in the you know, a lot of times when people have big goals, like I'm going to do the AT, or I'm going to start this business, or I'm going to whatever, name it. Sometimes the closest people to you are the ones that
the biggest naysayers.
Yeah, but it's not, and sometimes it's like not because they don't believe in you.
Right. It's not malicious.
They don't want to see you get hurt.
Exactly. No, absolutely 100%. Yeah, for sure.
So how do you deal with that?
I think that you just have to know that other people's fears are not your fears. Like what other people fear for you doesn't have to be what you fear for yourself. Now, was I afraid of getting hurt on the AT? Of course. Was I afraid that I was committing like career suicide by leaving a job for now? It's been, the engineering world. I've been gone for 4 years now, 5 years, 4 years, whatever it is, but it's like, yeah, that's something that I was concerned about, but it was worth it to me to take that risk. And I think that that's what you have to understand is that, when you're unhappy with your life later, it's your own fault. It's not anybody else's fault. So you have to take action. And it's not like you can't hear them out and hear what they have to say. But just realizing that everybody that does something like this, I think usually gets some of that pushback, from the people that they love the most. And my dad was enraged that I was going to go hike the Appalachian Trail by myself. Like he was just like, "You're not going alone." And I'm like, "Are you going with me?" "Well, okay then," then I'm going. And so, and it's like you said, it's because they love you. So I think knowing to expect that those things are going to happen, and then just, you have to push forward anyway. You have to try it, because I don't know. I just feel like the worst thing in the world would be to sit and wonder, what if I had done this, or what if I had taken that opportunity, or what if I had made that leap? And sure, if it winds up not working out, well, then you tried, and it is what it is. And then you try something else. And, but yeah, I think knowing that that will happen, that there will be people around you who will be like, maybe that's not a good idea, or do you think you should do that? But what will make you happy more than anybody else does. So got to listen to that.
Yeah. Well, you've done it. You've done it. Congratulations. I mean, you really have really, you were one of the people that I was the most excited to talk to, because it's a little different, but it's a lot the same as so many people that I've talked to that have become fishing guides, that have become, something outside of the norm.
Yeah.
And they've taken this chance, and basically they did it very similar to you, that, basically when you took that first step onto the Appalachian Trail, you were committed. You had done whatever you needed to do to make sure that you were going to complete that mentally, financially, emotionally. Everything is set and ready to go. You burn the boats, and now you're going.
Go.
And that tends to be the recipe, I think.
I think so too. It's like sometimes you throw yourself to the wolves, but it's like all or nothing. It's gonna happen. Here we go.
Yeah. So the last question.
Yeah.
What is Homemade Wanderlust? How does that name?
Where
do you get that name?
Okay, that's a good question. So when I started the blog, so I love gardening, and I kind of have this contradictory thing in my mind of like, I want some land to homestead, and like I compost here, and I do some smaller things, but and I grew up with my grandparents. I grew up like close to my roots, so there's kind of like that homemade aspect of like, just being self-sufficient. And then there's also like the wanderlust aspect of, I want to get out and see things and explore. And so it's just kind of the mixture of the two, I think, kind of seem to contradict one another, but somehow they work in my mind. So, so that's kind of what it was about. And I had originally intended the blog to kind of cover some of the things that I do while I'm at home, the gardening and the composting and the, making flower bed borders out of pallets, or, whatever I was doing. And then also the wanderlust aspect. But I think right now the wanderlusting kind of took over. So, so it just turned into mainly, backpacking and exploring. So,
it's a great name.
But the name was already there, so it's stuck,
It's a great name.
Thank
you. So tell the listeners how they can support you, how they can find you, how they can use your Patreon, how they can...
Yeah, sure. So the channel is Homemade Wanderlust. So if you go to YouTube and just search that, or even, Dixie Backpacking or whatever, it'll pop up. I also have a website, homemadewanderlust.com, and that's WANDERLUST. And both the website and the channel have links to the Patreon and all that. I'm also on Instagram and Facebook. And actually, a great tool if folks are interested in backpacking, other than watching the videos, of course, on Facebook there's the Homemade Wanderlust backpacking forum group, and I think we have like 25,000 to 30,000 members in that group now. So I'm one person and I have my limited experience, but there are folks in there who have hiked all over, backpacked all over. So if somebody has a question and they want, more than one opinion, they can go there and post a question, and people will chime in, So I kind of wanted to create that community for that purpose, because I had people saying like, well, have you ever heard of a diabetic through hiking? And I'm like, well, I haven't, but I bet it's happened, or maybe people can brainstorm some suggestions together, So that's a pretty good resource. But yeah, either on any of the really social media platforms or whatever, and on Patreon it's the same thing, Homemadewanderlust. So but yeah, it's all pretty much the same name.
All right. Well, thanks for telling me all your
Thank
stories
you.
and sitting down. It's really a pleasure to talk to you. And again, congratulations on designing
Thank
your
you.
life exactly the way that you want it.
Thank you very much.
All right. Until next time. See ya.